everybody, just a quick reminder, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, leave a good review, and just interact with us here at Spirit Pop. It really does help us grow the Spirit Pop community.
Well, Crystal, I feel like we have walked down the street of Pop Roster, and now we are turning the metaphysical corner.
Well, I'm excited. This is the part of the pop where we talk about just spiritual things. And I think I don't know if people like this part of the pop the best. I think some people kind of like it all.
They love it. I think they love it.
They do tend to, when they reach out to us, they talk about the metaphysical corner.
They do.
And this is the part that we love to talk about too. So, Bryan, tell us what we are talking about today.
Spirit signs. Now, I'm not talking about the sign you see around Halloween when the spirit store pops up in your local neighborhood. I'm not talking about that sign. We're talking about signs that spirit is communicating with you, to you. Those kind of signs.
And I love this subject because I think when we become aware and conscious to the way that spirit actually operates in our lives, and then we begin to notice it, we affirm for ourselves that spirit is indeed always around us. There's always emissaries and guides and friends and spirits who attend to us. And the more we notice that, the more we can actually interact with them. So I love this subject. Now, I actually have a PDF. Thank you very much. I have a PDF.
Fabulous. There is a PDF for that.
There's a PDF. There's always a PDF for something, my friend. And I'm going to be reading through some. I wrote these signs out many, many, many moons ago. I'm going to be going through some of these signs, but I'll also be offering this PDF at the end of our discussion on Metaphysical Corner, where you can go. I know, for free and everything, of course. Go download it. You can read it on your own time, and you can totally get hip to the way that spirit works.
See, we're always taking care of you here at the Spirit Pop Podcast.
Always thinking about you.
Always.
But before I get into the PDF, what I wanted to ask you was basically your own experience, because I know you're a very spiritual person. I know you're currently working on your mediumistic abilities, and I know you're sensitive. So how does spirit tend to show up? You're very, very emotional. Very emotional. How does spirit tend to show up for you?
It is smells. Sometimes I'll smell something random. Like when I smell lilacs, I know my mother or my grandmother is around because they loved lilacs. They had lilac bushes at the house. Another way my mother reaches out to me are cardinals. Always cardinals. And it's so funny because I will be, all of a sudden my mother will like pop into my mind, and cardinals will be banging at the window if I'm inside. Or if I'm outside and my mother pops into my head, cardinals will land on the fence all around me. And there are at least 3, sometimes 4. And it's just, that is one of the ways. And other things, in terms of hearing a voice, a word or two, or seeing like either an image of something or an outright word.
Okay.
Or it could be just, maybe a song on the radio. Just like I'm thinking about something and I'm like, gosh, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to think. I really need some direction. And then a song will come on. And it's so funny because I don't listen to the radio. I listen to Spotify. And so I have like my liked songs. But what I do is I just put it on and I just listen. And then inevitably when something like signy is happening, my Spotify will like cut out mid-song and another song will just pop on. And I'm like, why'd that do that? And that song has something to do with what I'm thinking about. And then as I kind of ponder it through the day, I'm like, oh my God, it just gave me sort of a thought and a direction to kind of pursue.
I love that. Oh, I love that. And you know what I also love with songs is when do you ever wake up dreaming a song?
Yes.
Or like you've been listening to a song in your dreams and then you wake up and you remember what song it was. I always tell people, if that ever happens to you, immediately Google that song and the lyrics and then read through all of the lyrics, because probably somewhere in the lyrics there is a message that spirit is trying to get to you. So I think songs and song lyrics are really, really, really fun. But that's kind of the way spirit works, right? Because spirit really never jumps right in front of you and then tells you, Bryan, I need you to do this, or Bryan, you should take a look at that. It's always kind of subtle. And it's always on the periphery or the outskirts of the life, because Spirit is always honoring our free will and how you as a soul choose to live your life and the path that you go and the people that you meet when you're walking down the street. These are the people that you meet each day. But Spirit allows you to live your life in the way that you want to, and they're always kind of just tapping you on the shoulders to direct you and guide you. And the signs that we're going to talk about are some of the ways they kind of tap us on the proverbial shoulder. So I'm going to go through these, and then I'm going to ask you whether you've ever experienced them. And I think a lot of people listening are probably going to be like, that happens to me all the time, and I never knew that this was potentially a sign that spirits were around. You ready?
This is exciting. Yes.
I know.
I'm so ready.
I know.
Oh.
The first one, I already know what you're going to say. The first one is animal reactions. Animals, cats and dogs, and other kinds of animals are always integrated with like fifth dimensional energy, and also are able to peer into different astral spaces. And so if you ever see your cat kind of looking up at a corner, or if your dog kind of gets up and looks around and they're interested in something that you can't see, that's often a sign that there are spirits around you that they can see, but that you can't. Has that ever happened to you?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So when I first got Raven and Claire home, they were sleeping out in the great room, and I would just pull up the camera and I'd watch them on the night vision camera. And one particular night there was, and I thought it was dust, but I'm starting to think it was an orb because it was moving about and the dogs were like this, following it and literally following it. And I'm like, oh, thinking that might have been an orb. But they do. Claire is very, very tuned in. And there'll be times when she'll just, and then she'll, you know, it's so wild to see her like lock in on whatever it is. And a lot of times I think it's Raven that she sings since, you know, Raven went on to Spirit. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. You know, there was this one time that Jeremy and I were taking magic mushrooms, years ago. And we were doing it in a sacred way. Like, we weren't just doing it to just have fun, but consequently we were having a lot of fun. We walked out into, the dogs were in their dedicated area all together. And at the time we had 3 dogs, but we walked out and they looked at us so funny. Like, they almost didn't recognize our energy. And as it turns out, I believe it was because half of our energy was absolutely astral. So they were actually seeing our meat suit, our bodies, but our energy was somewhere else, but kind of connected. And so they were looking at us, but like all around us. And they were very, very like, whoa, what's going on here? Because we were just, we were multidimensional, but they could see it and they didn't know what to really do with that. So yeah, I absolutely believe that animals are attuned to the world of spirit. And if you watch them, they'll show you when somebody's around.
Absolutely.
The next one is, this is interesting, artwork. Okay. Guides and emissaries will often emerge within artwork, especially works of art that we create ourselves. Because art is creative. That means we're tapping into creator energy and source energy when we are creating. So if you're a painter or a sculptor, and as you're doing that, you'll often kind of get messages either right there within the art, or they'll start coming in as you're doing your art. But also, you can kind of divine or scry with artwork. So if you have like spiritual pieces of art, or even just regular pieces of art, if you get yourself into a meditative state and gaze into the art, you'll start to see things move around. You'll start to get messages. You'll start to open up your clair abilities. Now that one's a little more fringe. Has that ever happened? Have you ever, are you creative in any way like that? Do you draw?
No,
do you sing?
I'm so boring. No? I mean, I doodle, and that's interesting because I do find there I'll just sit and doodle. Sometimes I'll find patterns in what I doodle. I don't know if they mean anything, but it's something. But I tend to kind of space out sometimes and doodle. But no, I'm not. My brother is an artist. He can draw like, oh my God. I never got that.
It would be interesting to ask him if he ever... And I really do think, like, as you're doodling too, you're just opening up your clairs because you're present with the creation of that. It'd be interesting to ask your brother, though, if he's ever like received, I don't know if he's a spiritual person generally. Maybe he's not paying attention anyway.
Not super, but I do know that since our mom passed, that I will say that there have been times when he's had dreams of my mother, and I get the very strong sense that wasn't actually a dream. It was an actual visitation. And so I'll tell him, I will say, that was definitely not a dream. That I really feel was a visitation. So I think he's open to it to a degree, but he doesn't like actively practice anything like that.
Well, for the artists out there, pay attention as you're creating art, or pay attention as you're interacting with art, because spirit can use art and artwork to get a message to you. The next one is clapping and snapping. Have you ever heard like a snap?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Spirit loves to do that. Yeah.
And
that's
knocking.
like,
and knocking.
Knocking too. That to me, I don't know about you, but to me, when I hear a snap, it's usually like, hey, pay attention. Hey, something's going down. You're not noticing it. We need you to get conscious. When have you heard snaps and claps?
One time when I was driving, it was, I was driving like I normally drive, and I got and I was like, oh. And then I'm like, oh, I don't know. I had the overwhelming urge to change lanes. So I changed lanes and ended up getting in a lane where I had to turn because there was a whole muck going on ahead of it. And so I had to go around it. So I feel like that was a, hey, bro, you're going to get stuck in traffic if you don't turn. So while there was no message to turn, that the snap alerted me, and I just felt the need to shift.
Oh, that's great.
But sometimes it happens when I'm going to bed. Like I kind of put myself in, do some meditation and some gratitude vibrations before I go to bed. And then I get into the bed to actually go to bed. And just as I'm starting to doze off, I will get a clap or a snap. And sometimes I hear my name very clearly.
Oh, yes,
and so I'm like, hi, like, what's going on?
Are you ever woken up by hearing your name?
Yes.
I am too.
Yes.
So that's interesting. So I told you this story in a previous Metaphysical Corner where I actually began to wake up from a deep sleep, hearing voices in my room. And I became aware that the voice was mine, and also a male voice. And then as I began to wake up, they said, oh, Crystal's waking up. Like, oh, we got to stop talking. I got to pop back into my own body. So I think that like a lot of, we're connected to everything our spirit is doing while we're sleeping. We're always connected to that. And sometimes we become conscious of our spirit speaking about us. But there's also just, especially if you're mediumistic, Bryan, there's also spirits that are around you anyway that might be trying to get your attention. And spirit guides often will say your name to get your attention. So clapping, snapping, saying your name, absolutely. The easiest way for spirits to give you a sign or to communicate with you is through dreams. So we've already had a whole Metaphysical Corner about dreams, but just know that when you're dreaming, when you're sleeping, all of your walls and your energy, your resistance is down. You're purely in the domain of subconscious, and it is very easy for spirits and deceased loved ones and for angels and guides to access you while you're sleeping. So if you're not paying attention to your dreams, and if you're not actually keeping a dream journal, you really ought to be, because I think, I don't know, the majority of spirit messages happen while we're sleeping. And you keep a dream journal, right? You said that you did.
I absolutely do.
And you work with your dreams. Very good.
Yeah.
What about ear ringing? Does that ever happen to you?
At least 5 times a day.
How does it happen? Like, what does it feel like?
It feels like, it almost reminds me of the old audiogram tests. It'll be one ear. Sometimes it goes into the other ear, but it's usually one or the other. Yes. But everything else will go away. Now, there are sometimes ones that are faint. There are some that are just, oh, this is happening. And like right now I'm talking to you and I've got, headphones on, so I kind of hear myself inside my head. It goes to that point where if I were to speak, it's like hearing me through this, but the ringing is like right on point. And so when it happens, I always kind of just say to myself, whatever download, attunement, upgrade, whatever this is, I am fully open to it. And, when you send it down and give me immediate knowing, so that when it comes into me, I know exactly what to do with it.
I love that. And I love that you said download or attunement, because I do think ear ringing is often us receiving packages of energy and information from the world of spirit. And a lot of the times we don't know what it is. A lot of the times it's being given to us because we're actually adjusting vibrationally. Like we hit a new level and now we have access to all the cool stuff on that consciousness grid, and we begin to download it, and we can experience that as ear ringing. But any kind of vibrational or frequency shift around us can also give us this ear ring. And when angels and masters and spirit guides step into our field, kind of draw close to us, we might perceive that as a frequency shift that we actually hear clairaudiently. So ear ringing can be tinnitus. You might have a problem, but it also can be your guides are around you, or you're receiving a download and an attunement. So pay attention to that. And I love that you, when you notice it, you kind of take a beat and you're like, let me be conscious and aware. Let me fully integrate this. Let me participate with what's being given to you.
Yeah,
all right.
Because I feel like it is a gift. So I must receive it. And when I started this work with doing mediumship, I said, I have to be very open. I have to be very present in the moments. I can't, think about the future, worry about the past. Like, to really center, you just need to be mindful. So I sit in that and I practice that. And so there are times when I'll just be sitting and having like a mindfulness meditation. And I mean, it will be like just so loud and I get tinglies all over. So I try to be very aware and very thankful for what I am receiving.
Ooh, tinglies are coming up, so we'll get to that. The next one is electronic anomalies, like when lights flash or like when your TV turns off or on. Actually, to me, if your electronics turn off, that's more likely to just be kind of random, surgy kind of stuff. But when your TV turns on or when your microwave turns on from an off position, that always makes me feel like, wait a minute, somebody's turning that on in the world of spirit. So electronics and things like that, do you ever have? But also, sometimes those electronics are affected by us and our own energy, right?
Well, we've done that a couple of times.
Yes, we have. Yes, we have. So do you experience any of that light flashing or...
Light flashing, yes. When I'm in the kitchen cooking sometimes and I get in my zone, sometimes the light right by me will flicker and flutter, and then it doesn't when I'm not around it. And then there are times when I'm vibing very high with Crystal and Compton, and we like knock out the internet.
I know, and half an hour later, you're doing your router, you're doing everything. We're like, oh, yeah, sometimes that happens. But that's us. That's not necessarily spirit, but it is very common for spirits to use the electronics to get messages to us, especially discarnate entities and deceased loved ones. For example, my dad passed in 1995. And for as spiritual as he was, granted, he was also very damaged, but he was a spiritual person on a soul level. For as spiritual as he was, it took him a long time to kind of figure out how to work the matrix and come back and start to manipulate physical reality. It took almost 10 years before he started to flip a light, or he started to get my attention in that way. One day I was sitting in my living room and I was meditating and I was, being contemplative spiritually. And all of a sudden this huge fan that I had in my living room just started it turned on. And then it just started going faster and faster and faster and faster. And it kind of freaked me out. But then I had a message come through, and this was actually my father saying, look, see, I'm here. I figured it out. And from time to time, he'll use electronics and things of that nature to get my attention. So if that's happening to you, if your stuff is turning off or on, or if there's fluctuations or anomalous things happening with your electronics, it could be you. You might be psychic, or you might have big energy, or it could be spirits trying to give you a sign. Next is energy rushes, which you were talking about, tingles.
Yeah.
And I knew this woman, her name was Lisa Robinette. She's awesome, but she would call these truth chills, like when spirit was giving her something or she was hearing something that really resonated with her, she'd get these truth chills and these waves of energy. And the reality is, when spirit draws close, our physical instrument is absolutely impacted by this, and we're going to feel stuff in our physical body. One of the ways that we can feel them is through tingles, or like when the energy gathers at the back of your neck, the nape of, or your scalp starts to constrict, or you can actually feel your third eye start to shift around. That's often because we've got spirits stepping forward. Do you feel that? You do, because you're very empathic and you're very clairsentient.
I do get that. And I get a lot of like tapping. Sometimes it feels like someone with nails is just very lightly just kind of scratching, but it's always like right here. And then there are times when I'll feel my crown sort of explode, and my crown chakra just, and it's wild. And of course, when I'm doing Reiki work, my hands will get really, really, really hot.
Right.
So, but I love that. It's just, it's just one of those confirmations that maybe you didn't know was something spiritual. And yes, it is.
It definitely is. Do you want to go over just a few more? Are you having some fun?
Absolutely.
Okay. The next one we've already talked about, but to just confirm what you said, essences. So fragrances, smelling flowers or smelling cookies, or sometimes smelling sort of other types of things like, I don't know, something that doesn't smell so good can be an indication that there's a spirit around you, just letting you know, hey, those lilacs are from me because I love lilacs. And so I'm just giving those to you to remind you that I am always with you. So you called that right. That's also called clairalience. Remember, we talked about that too.
I am an alien. You told me so.
You have been an alien all your life. You're a starseed. I want to go home, Mama. I want to go home.
I want to go home, Mama.
One is called name being called. We've already talked about that. So if you hear your name being called, whether waking you up from sleep or when you're meditating, or if you hear your name being called like in your house, has that happened to you? Like
God, yeah. And at work. I'll like pop out of my office. Yes. Because I'll be at work working and I'll hear my name. And so I go out to see who, outside my office to see who's calling me, and there's nobody out there. And I'm like, okay.
It's just spirit saying hello.
Spirit.
Yep. Very normal. Orbs. You mentioned orbs.
Yes.
And also lights. So let's talk about like light anomalies.
Okay.
One of the things that happens to me, especially when I am doing deep spiritual work, or I'm spending like a season of my life, like really meditating a lot or studying a lot, or maybe I'm in fellowship with a lot of spiritual people, is I will start to see flashes of light all the time. Sometimes these are just pinpricks of light that I will see, and sometimes these pinpricks of light have a color to them, like an indigo or a gold or a red. And that to me indicates my third eye is opening, and or I'm picking up the color signature of a spirit that's in my space. Other times, and I'm wondering if this has ever happened to you, it's almost like, remember those back in the day, those old-fashioned flashes that would go off when you took a picture? It's like the whole room kind of illuminates has this ever happened to you? It has.
It has, and it's always been purple or gold. And maybe
like
once
the whole, like it feels like the whole space is illumined for a moment, and then
and then just goes away. And I think I told you, and I think it was a Metaphysical Corner when we talked, where I sort of zoned out and I saw a whole other life going on, and it sort of the landscape went away from where I was and turned into what I was seeing. It was with gold, sort of a flash, sort of eating away at what was, in my perception, reality, in giving away into, what I was seeing. So that's happened on that level too.
Wow, that sounds like that movie Malignant. Have you seen Malignant?
I have not, and we have talked about
Listen, you have got to watch Malignant. I just watched it with my daughters last week, and they were just like, this is so freaking good. It is good. Did you like The Conjuring?
Yes, I did.
Okay, it's by James Wan, who did The Conjuring and The Conjuring universe. I'm just telling you, it is really good, Brian. Okay. I want to watch it with you. We got to talk about it while we do. But anyway, she kind of has visions where her world sort of melts away and she's suddenly in a different sort of space. And so it reminded me of that. But yeah, so seeing kind of the flash of light illumine, to me, it's almost like two worlds are colliding, or two dimensions are kind of colliding. A flash takes place, and then you're able to kind of pick up what's going on in a different space, a different dimensional space. But lights and also orbs. And for whatever reason, across the planet right now, there are more and more people experiencing full-on orbs, like floating into their room, their living room or their bedroom, like kind of big too, like a basketball, kind of an orb floating in front of their bed. And sometimes they'll see things in the orbs. Sometimes the orb will speak to them, or they'll get a message from the orb. Sometimes the orb turns into something else, like a full-blown apparition or a spirit. But orbs are often dimensional vehicles or Merkabas for interdimensional beings. I think a lot of aliens actually transdimensionally shift through the function of an energy field, which can show up in our experience like an orb. I'm going crazy. I'm going to stop right there. But orbs. So also orbs in your pictures can often mean you've got spirits around you, or a lot of dust in your house. All right. Well, there's more, but let me see if I just specific songs. We've already talked about that. All right. Last but not least, we'll just talk about threes.
Okay.
When things happen in threes, patterns. That's typically spirit or spirit guides trying to get your attention about something. So maybe a long lost friend that you haven't seen in a while, maybe you think of that person one day. And then 2 days later, your sister asks you, hey, have you ever talked to long lost person? When was the last time you talked about them? And then 3 days after that, you see something else about this person, or you hear something else about this person, or his name just happens to be in your experience. When you experience a pattern of 3, pay attention to that. It's typically spirit trying to say, hey, you might want to call your friend, or hey, this person is actually thinking about you and attaching cords, or hey, there's something going on around this person, place, or thing that you need to be aware of. Spirit loves to use synchronicity, loves to use repetition to get us to notice something that's happening in our environment. So I've just made a rule in my life. If it shows up 3 times, I'm stopping and I'm looking at that. I'm talking to spirit and I'm asking some questions about that. So do you notice patterns and synchronicities in your life? And what do you do when you do notice that?
Well, I have noticed them before. I have to say, honestly, before I got super involved in spirituality, I never thought anything of it. I just figured, oh, it's just happening, whatever. As I got more involved into spiritual studies, I realized that there are messages in that. And it could be that, you know, your friend that you're suddenly thinking of is in a time of need, or, you know, something about you two reconnecting you need to. You know, there's a lesson in that or whatever. But I never really paid attention initially to it. And yet it showed up a lot. And I'm like, why didn't I pay so much attention to it? You know, back then. Now, of course, I see it. I'm like, oh, okay. And I jot things down a lot. Or I'll send myself a text, like, you know, something happens and I'm like, well, that just seemed so random for my day. And then something pretty much the same will happen again. That's 2. And then a 3rd time. And I'm like, okay, now I really need to meditate on this tonight and figure out what is going on. What do I need to do? So, yeah.
Very good. Yes. So these are just some spirit signs that the world of spirit uses to get our attention. But I think the reason this is a good topic to discuss is so that everybody understands that we live in truly a very diverse spiritual ecosystem. We are sharing space right now, wherever you are listening to this, you are sharing space right now with countless interdimensional beings that you cannot see because you only pick up less than 1% on the electromagnetic spectrum. If you could see it all, you would be, well, I think we'd be shocked. I would die if I saw it all, like what actually is happening. And so it is normal for you to have accidental encounters with the beings that are sharing your space. Sometimes they show up in your space and they notice you noticing them and they run away because something shifted in the frequency and you became aware of each other. But many times we have intentional encounters where our friends in spirit are trying to get our attention to just let us know, hey, this is happening, or we are here, or you, like Michael Jackson said, you are not alone. You are not alone. We are here with you. And we want you to know that. And the thing is, Bryan, if we stop and acknowledge these signs and then ask for more, if we actually give spirit permission to speak to us more clearly, evidentially, and loudly, they will. The signs are the beginning. That's just the tapping on the shoulder. But when we lean into it, we amplify it. And if you want more signs, ask for them. You will get them.
Yeah. Spirit is very responsive. I mean,
Very,
truly.
very.
I mean, once you figure out how they are communicating with you, because the way they communicate with you, Crystal, may be a little different than they do with me in terms of what I'm
Sure.
seeing. And so it's sort of, they fine tune it to you. So once you get it, it's like almost like learning a new language. But once you learn it, then it's, oh my God, it's happening all the time.
And it is. It's such a magical,
amazing.
Beautiful
It really is.
world of spirit.
I was gonna say, that's why, like, when I get up in the morning and like I take the dog out, it's, you know, it's still night, it's still dark, it's very early, it's like 4:30 in the morning, but I'm out and I'm vibing and I see the moon and I just feel all the energy and I'm like, thank you so much for this.
Yes.
Like this moment, it's so quiet and it's just, it's one of those moments where you realize I am this small and I'm one little piece of all of this, and yet it is all connected.
It is.
We are all connected. It's just beautiful.
It is beautiful. So to anybody who would like to download this PDF, there are more signs. We didn't get to them all. We want to invite you to go to my website, crystalanncompton.com/signs. That's Crystal, like the rock, Ann with an E, Compton, like straight outta, .com/signs. It's super easy. Go to the page. You can download it. It is no problem, but check into it. Like, really get curious about how spirit works, because when we're curious and lean into it, that's when things start popping off and it gets fun out here.